Good morning and welcome to a virtual church service from the Palmyra Reformed Church, Palmyra, New York. Glad you're here with us today. I'm Thomas Ondra, and although I'm far away, Sun City, Arizona, I'm with you in spirit. Sorry about the rather casual dress today, but it's going to be 110 out, so you need to cut me some slack. At any rate, I'm glad to be with you and provide this week's sermon. And I gotta tell you, I love a good story, don't you? A good story can teach, inspire, even help us cope. And we need all of that today, I think, which is why I decided to preach on one of the best stories from the Bible. Even if you've heard it before, it's still a good one and worth considering all over again. The story is from St. Luke's Gospel, and Jesus is the one telling it. Goes like this. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, "Give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son gathered all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a famine in the country, and he began to be in need. So he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him into the fields to feed swine. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am starving? I'll go back to my father, and I'll say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he arose and began the trip home. But while he was still a way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and prepare it. We must feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found.' So they began to celebrate." Wow. Now that's a good story. Doesn't matter if it was set thousands of years ago or here and now. The tale of the prodigal son is one of compassion, of relief, of trying to make things right, of good news, of amnesty. And don't equate amnesty with that political nonsense going on these days. This is about not giving someone their due, about saying, let's start over again. I mean, pretend you're the son. You're young, you think you know it all, you're infallible. You got the gumption to ask for your inheritance way ahead of time. And surprise, Dad gives it to you. But after the big party and the money's gone, so too your friends. You're left stranded and destitute. Hunger sets in, and that's a pretty good teacher. So flat on your proverbial back, you hatch a scheme. Go home, beg forgiveness, hope for some sort of a break, maybe be treated as a servant, which is better than you have at present. On the other hand, pretend you're the father. Surprised at your kid's behavior, you nevertheless couldn't dream that he'd ever leave home. And now you look every day at his empty room and the few items left behind. The chores he used to do, well, they're yours now, and all they do is make you think of happier times. Times when the family was complete, times when you felt blessed. But those times are no more, and whenever you're out in the front yard, you look longingly down the road to see a figure, but there is none. If it ended this way, it wouldn't be a good story. Thankfully, it doesn't. The son makes it home almost. When the father spots him, can't believe his eyes, rushes out to meet him, doesn't even let the kid get all the way through his pre-rehearsed speech. The party results on the father's theme, "This son of mine was lost and is now found, was dead and is alive again." Let me tell you, anybody who's ever made a really bad decision, wasted resources, fractured a relationship, let time slip away, they ought to relate to this tale. For it's good to see or hear of compassion, of relief, of trying to make things right, of good news, of amnesty, of a fresh start. People need that sort of thing. Practically all the stories we hear and see about today are about anything but. Light turns red when you're going through the intersection, there'll be a letter in the mail. Drop a $20 bill on the floor, don't expect anybody to tap you on the shoulder and hand it back. Saw a report on 60 Minutes a week or so back about guy who organized a walkout at Amazon. They were concerned for their health over the coronavirus. He was fired within 2 hours. Not a lot of stories about forgiveness, and that's too bad. It makes our world a little less neighborly, a little colder, a little more like you'll behave that way since you've been treated that way. People need stories, good stories, stories of compassion and the like, and the prodigal son is certainly one of those. But I found another one, a bit more contemporary and really interesting, since it shows that compassion, forgiveness, a new start is still in vogue, or ought to be. The story was featured in the New York Times. And it featured one of the city's great hotels, the Waldorf Astoria on Park Avenue. I couldn't afford to sleep there, but I did walk through the lobby once, and I can tell you, it was pretty ornate. The story went like this. Featured a soul named Nathaniel Mullner, who wanted the tiny teapot to look as good when he gave it back as it must have looked when somebody walked off with it a long time ago. At his home in New Orleans, he took it down from the spot in the hutch that it had occupied for years and started polishing. 75 years of tarnish, he said, had to come off. The silver trim, it was pitch black. Only when the shiny thing was looking great did he pack it up and bring it to New York. His destination was what he called its rightful owner, the Waldorf Astoria. On Tuesday, he presented it to Matt Zolby, the hotel's director of sales and marketing. It was the latest arrival under a no questions asked amnesty program that was announced in June. The Waldorf said it was looking for items that had begun life at the hotel and ended up in drawers, attics, and other hiding places. Silverware, china, and yes, teapots that had been, quote, secretly checked out, as the hotel politely put it on its Facebook page. Some sent in ashtrays, some sent in knives and forks before the amnesty program officially ended on September 15, but things continue to trickle in. We've had a very nice number of submissions, the whole hotel's social media director said. Mr. Mullner said that he remembered the teapot from when his family lived in Jackson Heights, Queens. He said that for a while his father lived near the Waldorf and it loomed something as a landmark in their lives. Dad would say, "America's the greatest country, New York's the greatest city, and the Waldorf is the greatest hotel," Mr. Molnar recalled. So I knew I had something from the epitome of crockery. But Mr. Molnar said the teapot had long troubled him because obviously it had been stolen. "I never felt comfortable having that thing," he said. "It was a matter of principle. Didn't matter where it came from." And he said no, he actually did not know who pilfered the teapot. This was not a tea for two teapot, by the way. Mr. Molnar said his had a capacity of exactly one perfectly brewed cup. And that's a good story, too. Pretend for a minute that you're the hotel. All those niceties, silverware, ashtrays, towels, bathrobes, teapots, they all cost money. They all have a tendency to walk away. You'd like to get them back. Heck, you'd probably like to search the customers before they leave the premises, but that'd ruin your reputation. So you try the high road. Why not offer the opportunity to return what's been taken without consequences? People might take you up on it. Pretend you're the customer, or the relative of a former customer no longer with us. Not proud anymore of the items sitting in your hutch or on the desk. You wish they'd never grabbed it in the first place. But how to get it back to the Waldorf without being cuffed? Then comes news of the hotel's return policy, and it's just what you needed to make amends. A chance to make amends, and probably more than that. More people would likely do it if they didn't have to face prosecution. Which is why this is also a good story, an example of the fact that sometimes the opportunity, a second chance, presents itself, and sometimes people make good use of it. For as I said, the world needs more good stories, tales of compassion and the like, and the Waldorf Astoria's amnesty program is certainly one of those. Like the tale of the prodigal son, a sense of belonging, of forgiveness, of a new start, of a chance to make things right, offers hope. And hope is what teaches, inspires, helps us cope. And God, the God of the Bible, is all about hope. All about relief, of trying to make things right, of good news, of amnesty. Dust off the old Bible and reread some of the great stories for yourself, like Noah and the Ark, Jacob and Esau, David and Goliath, Ruth and Naomi and Boaz, and especially Jesus on the cross. Each one is packed with hints of hope. It's all God's about. It's what He's about. Maybe you have a good story of your own. If so, you might set it side by side with one of these. Write it down, send it in, save it for a rainy day, and recognize that when you're reading the great stories of the Bible, look to see what the Lord is doing. Because it's all about hope, and hope teaches, and inspires, and helps us cope. Amen? Amen.